Hello fellow tankers, this is Dauntless and welcome to Scout Guide. For this episode I'll be showcasing you how to effectively spot on the map Karelia. Now Karelia on standard mode is not the best map to spot on just because there aren't a lot of opportunities. As you know, the south is dominated by heavies and tank destroyers, and it's a corridor, meaning that unless you're really careful you probably won't get a lot of effective spotting. And the north, while it is okay, most of the time to get that spotting damage you need someone shooting for you, and with the artillery nerf and the low amount of damage that they do, it's really not worth spotting for artillery. And in this situation, let's say you're sitting on the northern base and enemies are pushing in. Well, you're going to have tank destroyers most likely sitting here, and if you do, yes, it can be effective to spot things that are pushing, but because of the render range and because of the rocks in the way, enemies can usually approach all the way up to around this A4, A5, or alternatively B4 or B5 area before your allies are going to get shots on them. And as you can see, sitting in this area, you can easily spot to that range, and so tank destroyers with that amount of view range will easily be able to spot those things for themselves, making it kind of ineffective. And the same thing goes for this side. Yes, you can kind of get yourself into this situation and spot things coming around this corner, but again, you might end up waiting half the game for the enemy to push, and a lot of the time your allies are going to be pushed into the middle of that area anyway, and you won't really be able to get any of those initial spots. And that's really what I want to try to show you in this series. So there are only a couple spots that I found to be effective for spotting on this map, and I'm going to show them to you in this replay. There is one spot that I didn't showcase because I really don't recommend taking it, because it is extremely risky and it's very dependent on the enemy not taking it. Now you can risk it from either side, and it's actually this bush right here between these two rocks. There's a clump of bushes, and if you notice that the enemy team has no medium tanks or very few medium tanks and no light tanks, it is a risk, but if you can get yourself, kind of work your way from either side, just kind of hug the cliff, get yourself up to this position, kind of make sure the coast is clear, and then get yourself into this bush, it can be effective for spotting things that might be coming through, and alternatively tank destroyers that are sitting on their base. But it's extremely risky, and I've done it multiple times, and I think maybe out of 5 games it'll pay off maybe once or twice, and the other 3 games you're going to get yourself killed really early on. So again, not really worth it in my opinion. But these locations that I'm going to show you are relatively safe, and hopefully you'll be able to utilize them on the battlefield. Anyway, we'll get this replay started here. So the first location that I want to show you is right down into the middle of the map, and there are a lot of bushes and there are a lot of rocks, and so it can be a little bit intimidating trying to decide exactly where you want to play and what rock you want to take, and this is one of the more effective ones in my opinion. This will allow you to catch heavy tanks that might be crossing either towards the north or the south. If you're cheeky and you think you can get away with it, you can take some snapshots like this if you like to. And right here, you're going to get yourself lit shooting at things like the 140, but depending on how panicked he is because he's taking all this damage suddenly, it can actually be pretty effective in getting that first early spot damage. And again, your view range does extend, and so if you have artillery, getting those lights on those heavies that are pushing across to either flank will allow your artillery to get that early damage, and if you're lucky and you have tanks that are pushing up with you, they'll be able to get that damage as well. And as you can see, your view range is extended far enough to where tanks that are pushing across the north flank anyway, you'll be able to spot. And if you do sneak out just a little bit from this bush and drive up into this area here, if the enemy has control of the hill, you'll be able to spot them for your tank destroyers. So this is a very effective bush in my opinion. You are allowed to take some sneaky shots if you feel like you want to risk it. Definitely have sixth sense if you're shooting to know when you're lit. And if you do get lit, just hide behind this giant rock and you'll pretty much be protected from anything that could possibly try to shoot at you, including artillery. Alright, so let's talk about alternative locations that you can take when you spawn on the northern base. Again, I did talk about taking that one rock down below, which is kind of a risky spot, and I do avoid taking that. And the hill, I mean, if you're a medium tank, you're welcome to brawl it, but again, if you're trying to get those spots early in the game or even late into the game, this is a great location alternative to the central area. The central area that I showed you previous to this is great for getting spots on anything that might be taking the hill, just because you're able to extend your view range deep into it later on in the game if they do have it. But the great thing about this location is that it's more focused on the north. Now, if the enemy, if you predict that the enemy is going to have a lot more tanks pushing into the northern area, sitting in this bush will allow you to extend your view range up into this area without getting lit. And if they do light you for some reason, you can easily duck down into this little hole and hide. But sitting in this bush, and you know, I would sit into it a little bit deeper once you realize that the enemy is pushing around this way, but this will extend your view range to the entirety of this area here, being able to spot any heavy tanks or medium tanks that might be pushing, and it'll allow you to take shots onto the hill if your allies are trying to contest it. Right here, these enemy vehicles, I mean, right in this exact situation, there are no shots, but if they decide to push towards you, you'll be able to get some sneaky shots in. And then your view range isn't quite good enough to extend onto the tank destroyers into the center of the map, but this is something that can easily be done by pushing forward along this crest as you take the north, and you'll be able to sit in a couple of these bushes here and slowly extend your view range over to the southern base. Let's talk about what to do when you spawn on the southern base. Now, the southern base only has really one viable option in my opinion. Again, there is the option of going to the middle and taking this little bush right in the middle here, but it's very risky and you can often get killed very quickly. So again, I don't really recommend playing that bush if you have the choice. This location is awesome because it's just aggressive enough and it's open enough to where you can extend your view range all the way to this ridgeline here, and theoretically any vehicle that's pushing down trying to get to either flank will get lit by you if you play this right. Now, unfortunately, your team usually isn't set up to be able to shoot that far in the very beginning, so you're not going to get too many spots, but it's still good to get that initial intel on what vehicle is going where, and if you have artillery on your side, they'll be able to bomb them very quickly, which is awesome for you. And another thing, you want to sit here long enough to get spots on vehicles like this Leopard. Usually you'll get spots on things that are pushing across this half of this line right here, as well as things that are on the hill if you push around. You'll also be able to spot things that might be trying to take the hill by coming around here, and then if you pull back and sit here when you're unlit, you can actually shoot through these trees and hit them without really getting lit. Now, this doesn't always work, but it's an option. If anything is being aggressive and if there's a light tank hiding out here, kind of like this SB-1C, you will end up getting lit if you fire your gun. Now, the cool thing is, if you're in this bush deep enough, you'll be able to spot things like the CML-2 and other tank destroyers that might be sitting along this ridge when they fire their gun. Now, it's very, very far away, so unless they shoot, you probably won't light them, but you'll also, you know, that's just something to keep in mind. Now again, you don't have to sit in this bush for the entirety of the game, but I just want to show you how there are more opportunities the longer you sit here, because some tanks, like this Oni that just got spotted, take longer, and usually they'll try to take shortcuts by pushing along the edge. And if you have anything like this T-32 or anything controlling the hill, you'll easily be able to farm a lot of spotting damage to these kind of enemies that are just kind of rash and pushing out into the open. And it can stack up really fast. Alright, so let's talk about an alternative location for when you spawn on the southern base. Now, obviously locations are very dependent on team composition and how your team decides to push with you. For instance, if you look at what the team is doing right now, the majority of the team is pushing to the south. Now, what does this mean for you? If you're pushing into the south, that means you're just going to get a lot more damage for assist when you have a lot more guns shooting for you. Taking the northern location that I showed you over in E4 would be counterproductive because you literally have nothing to shoot for you. Now, you can take a sneaky shot here if you're in a tank that's quick enough by just pre-aiming at things that are going to be pushing around the corner. Again, it is a little bit risky, but the odds are with this rock that you have in front of you as cover, you're going to be able to get away with it. In a derp cannon like the T-49 having that HE, odds are you're going to be able to track your opponent, and if you have anything that's behind you that's fast enough, they'll be able to put in shots as well. Now, this location doesn't work quite as well when you're pushing from the north, just because of the way the rock is angled. As you can see, the enemy has to come a lot straighter to get to the hill opposed to the other side. Now right here you'll notice that getting shots on enemy tracks like that is beautiful, because when you track opponents, you get that assist. And you'll also be able to spot deep tank destroyers, such as that STRV that might not previously have been lit by tanks that are behind you. And when you're feeling aggressive, you can definitely circle around when you have an opportunity like this and take out opponents that are going to be distracted by shooting things that are ahead of you. And then once this location and the hill is secured, you're able to come more forward like this and peek around the corner and get spots on that Jag Tiger, for instance. And this Panzer 58 is also taking the spots, but by coming around the corner and getting those spots, your allies that are pushing behind you will easily be able to net you more assist damage. Anyway, guys, hopefully you found this guide on how to spot on Karelia useful. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a like down below. And go ahead and tell me what map you'd like to see next, and I will consider making it my next Scout Guide video. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, feel free to do that now for more content like this in the future. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.